Welcome back to America Right Now. I'm Tom Basile. Well, folks, there is mounting evidence demonstrating that then Vice President Joe Biden illegally used his office to make millions for his family, and those financial interests may have impacted U.S. policy. But investigators in Congress, legitimate journalists, and ultimately prosecutors are not going to be able to form a complete picture of the wrongdoing without incorporating the actions of former President Barack Obama and his staff. It increasingly looks like the man who famously said never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up allowed Biden Incorporated to operate with impunity right under his nose. It's another black eye for a president whose legacy is more and more in shambles. Obamacare was a failure, raising health care costs by an average of 40% and eliminating health care choices for tens of millions of Americans. Mr. Obama was in on the phony Russia collusion scheme and spying operation against Donald Trump. Claims he made about his personal story have now been brought into question. His acquiescence of Russia's conquest of the Donbass in 2014 helped pave the way for the current war in Ukraine that has killed tens of thousands of people. His so-called foreign policy red lines were a mirage that emboldened radical Islamists. Perhaps worst of all, an additional 600,000 black families were living below the poverty line when he left office to live an elitist Martha's Vineyard lifestyle. Now the question is what President Obama and his staff at the White House, State, Justice, and Treasury Departments knew, and when did they know about the Biden foreign business dealings? Did Obama question the vice president's activities surrounding Ukraine and Russia? Did anyone scrutinize Mr. Biden's curious last-minute foreign trips to visit Ukraine and Chinese President Xi Jinping just days before Mr. Trump's inauguration? Did anyone ask why Hunter Biden was accompanying his father to countries where he may have business interests? Why were Biden family business associates granted access to the Obama White House dozens of times? Notorious for talking big but delivering only platitudes, Obama's apparent acceptance of his vice president's unethical or illicit activities makes him an even bigger fraud. There's little doubt that Obama knew that there was a revolving door of Hunter Biden business associates who visited the White House more than 80 times over the course of his administration. When it comes to the Victor Shokin affair, we now know that Obama's Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, wrote a letter to Shokin praising his anti-corruption efforts and pledging to provide further American resources to support him. President Obama's own task force on Ukraine concluded in 2015 that, quote, Ukraine had made sufficient progress on its reform agenda that would justify additional financial support. We now know that White House staffer John Flynn was used to keep Hunter Biden informed about the vice president's communication with Ukrainian officials. Vice President Biden was left to make his threats about aid to Ukraine and do his son's company a solid. Mr. Shokin got fired, the Ukrainians got their money, and in a very swampy sense, it all worked out for everybody who mattered. But for the vice president to steer that kind of diplomatic maneuver, the National Security Council, and therefore the West Wing, had to have known. President Obama apparently couldn't give a rip. He was likely so convinced that Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016 and Joe Biden would finally ride off into his political sunset that efforts by the vice president to profit off of his office were just inconsequential. For those who've followed Biden Incorporated for decades, it wasn't a stretch to think, okay, it's going to be finally time for the big guy to really cash in. There were ethics violations and possibly even crimes, but nobody cared. We also now know that the Obama White House employed Hunter Biden's friend, Kathy Chung, as an aide to the vice president. Chung was caught up in the Clinton Chinagate fundraising scandal in the 1990s. She was then asked, allegedly, to illegally transport top-secret documents to various locations when Vice President Biden was leaving office. All of this and more justify the implication of top Obama staffers, including the former president, Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, Chiefs of Staff to the Vice President Pitcock and Ricchetti, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, current National Security Advisor and former advisor to Vice President Biden Jake Sullivan, and other staff-level appointees. White Houses are very tightly controlled, folks. Unless Mr. Obama and his team were totally incompetent, he knew. He knew about Joe Biden's activities. Investigators must cast a wider net here. Joe Biden's corruption is another sign that Mr. Obama The vaunted transformational figure who made liberal commentators' legs quiver gave us nothing more than a thin veneer of hope and another thick layer of hypocrisy and beltway sleaze.